Hi, everyone. I'm Sam King with the Journey of the Universe 10 Years Later podcast. And I'm really excited today to be joined by my friend and collaborator, Richard Wormstall. Richard, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my privilege and pleasure to be here with you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Such a joy to connect with you as somebody who shares a deep passion for living cosmology
Mm,
and thinking and being in this sense of who we are in relationship to a larger story of the earth and the larger story of the universe across time.
mm,
And by way of introduction, um, Richard, you are a director of community programs at the Seeds Project and an educator, an urban cosmologist, and a musician. I know you've taught and designed programs at all levels of education, from elementary school to graduate school, and most recently served as director of communications at Meridian University. I know you've also served over 25 years of experience as a guitarist and a composer in styles ranging from Spanish to Middle Eastern, jazz to flamenco, blues, and hip hop. And your professional work and original research connects music with learning and healing into the evolutionary principles of the universe toward a realization of connectivity and shared humanity. And I know you're also a sound engineer and event designer with a specialty in multimedia production and music for film and radio. So many wide-ranging talents, Richard, and I'm just really excited for this chance to really sink in and hear a little bit more about your story today.
That's fascinating, and it's really interesting to hear all these different facets of how I have been described. And I do think that they are all connected. They are not separate entities. That was a great awakening in my own evolution to realize that music is fundamentally part of my cosmological exploration as to what it means to be a human being alive today. And that was a powerful moment in my own musical exploration. I remember I met Joanna Macy, uh, one of the wonderful elders that just recently passed, and
Mm.
I was so excited to tell her about the song I created and wanted to show it to her, and she was listening to it, and she closed her eyes and she said, "You're doing it for the earth." And my heart just burst in that moment, and I had this sensation that everything we do, we ought to do for the earth. And that was a great awakening that the creative spark that we have is something that we shouldn't just take lightly, but it is an extraordinary sacred gift that we can gift back to the earth. And to tell you a little bit about my own story and how I got to the
Peace.
expansive perspective of cosmology, um, I think I was always interested in the inner workings of the human mind. I was always observant and curious about how we make decisions, what makes us happy, what makes us sad, where does the grief and anxiety comes from, anxiety that has no face but just arises sometimes, and where does the sense of trust and belonging come from? So in my early years, I studied psychology. I moved to Los Angeles after growing up in Germany, and was fascinated by psychology. It offered me what I needed at that time. I learned about each of the theories and um, gained a lot of perspective to the inner workings and our relationship to our behavior and how the world responds to us based on it. But there was a distinctive day, and it was a curious day, very dramatic in my own world, but sometimes these days happen. And I woke up on that day and felt particularly good about going to school. I walked up the stairs at the university and felt like this is higher education and I'm receiving what I was looking for. Later that day, I walked on campus and I realized that none of us students were looking at each other. We're all just pacing quickly towards our destination, lecture hall, the library, or to our ride back home. And I thought, what is happening here? Why are we not actually seeing each other? Why does it feel like such a lonely experience? And as I walked back to my car, I actually got overwhelmed with tears coming down. And I thought, I have to find a different story, a different narrative, a different kind of school that brings me back to the fundamental relational space where we perceive one another openly. And I met a friend. This is how synchronicities sometimes happen. I met a friend who told me about the school up north in San Francisco, the California Institute of Integral Studies, and they teach a program, Philosophy, Cosmology, and Consciousness, and I could not believe that there is such a program. I had at that point no idea what cosmology meant, except for that I could feel that that is what I want to dedicate my life to. And so coming into the program and learning the pillars of the history of philosophy, being deeply cosmological, there's always the evolving narrative of human being to the larger world, human being to the earth, human being to the cosmos, and different iterations and arguments against it, and a refinement of the story. But the cosmological element for me offered a perspective that felt almost like a meta-narrative. I thought here is the possibility of a new story that is not religious in its nature, but it has spiritual consequences. It is secular in such a way that we study light, we study movement, we observe the universe as best as we can, reaching as far back as possible with the power of telescopes and beautiful observations and human reflection on it. And in the beginning, my consciousness felt completely overwhelmed by it, this sense of awe and wonder, to an extreme that I have never experienced before. And I think I'm still in that awe and wonder. There's no way I comprehend the complexity of what is going on, but I feel like that the story that emerges, the story of the universe, the way Brian Swimme so beautifully has put it, could be the new story for us to transcend the divides and the challenges that we are facing, because it is transcending the borders from one country to the other. It is transcending all the differences that we have a common origin story, that there is sort of symbolically light of the stars in all of us, that we are made out of the same matter that produces stars and planets and the moon and everything that we know. And the fact that the elements of our bodies are forged within the hearts of dying stars, that there's an enormous sense of creativity, that the universe itself, as it goes through the stages, develops, and each stage offers a new possibility of complexity, of matter to emerge, leading all the way up to life, and then life leading all the way up to consciousness and our ability to now perceive the universe and observe it and work with the sense of awe that we have inside, work with that sense of wonder and see where it carries us. I cannot imagine a more beautiful story.
Mm. So poetically said. And I love the way that your own personal narrative is folded into this larger narrative of the earth and the universe. It feels so seamless, and it feels as though you've found this kind of ancient lineage to participate consciously within. And I'd love to hear, Richard, about, ways that you have made literally musical the story of the universe. I know you're an artist and a musician. Love to hear more about how that sort of intellectual journey also became a reflection of your own creativity as well.
Hmm. That's a wonderful question. Every musician, I would assume, goes through phases of learning, and some of them are quite mechanical. There's no way you get around the fact that you have to practice your finger positions, your scales. You have to learn the chord progressions, musical theory, harmony, progressions, and I did that for as long as I could. I think for 10 years I was a good student and I practiced every day. And then I encountered a book that was called Zen Guitar, and it changed the framework. It changed the fundamental reason why we are playing music. And being a young person at that time, I'm not sure if I came from a place of ego, but I did not come from a place of the context of the earth or the universe, not yet. And the book brought mindfulness into the practice, and that there is a music that comes from the deep within. It emerges from a place that is potentially transpersonal in nature. It goes beyond the individual and reaches into the collective experience. And so I gave it a shot. Why not? I'm like, this sounds like interesting stuff. And I meditated for some time and started playing the guitar in a completely new way, like I've never played it before. And my mom happened to be in the kitchen at that time. She stopped what she was doing. She pointed at me and she said, "That's the music you will be known for." And what happened? What was that moment? What was really going on? And I've been exploring that origin event, that core event, and have been diving deeper into it, including that statement that John Macy did so confidently, so assured to tell me that I'm doing it for the earth. I started thinking like maybe this is what the music ought to be. Maybe the music that we're exploring, our creative spark that comes through in filmmaking and art, even in conversation, that it is not just for the purpose of entertainment, certainly not just for the purpose of showing off your skills, but there is a possibility of a kind of magic to happen. And I think that every artist that has spent time with it knows what I'm speaking about. This moment when you feel the borders of yourself are dissolving and the borders of something other is approaching and meeting one another, and you lose in some sense control, but you gain a different kind of control. You lose some form of agency, but you also participate in an agency that seems older and wiser than yourself. And it comes with such a sense of an inner excitement, a thrill of being carried on melodies that you are not solely responsible for. And then it approaches a sacred experience. Then it approaches what the Zen master who wrote the book on Zen guitar, what he was speaking about. And I'm thinking of Nietzsche's reflection on the arts and music and the ancient Greek theater, that it was a fundamental aspect of the human soul that required more than just data, that there was something in us that reached beyond the physical, and you could not force it. You can only be witness to it. And there's this moment that he describes in The Birth of Tragedy where the boundary between the performer and the stage and the audience dissolves, and you all together enter this space of an extraordinary experience that feeds an aspect of us that that is fundamentally also part of what it means to be a human being. So I feel that we should all be artists. We should all be taking the craft, even our little drawings that we do without thinking about it, and like giving it the love and the attention that it deserves, that there is a magic that is waiting to be discovered in the process.
Mm. It's beautiful, isn't it, to think about ourselves as an expression of a creative universe,
Mm,
a universe that has created as many as 2 trillion galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars, and to see our own creativity as an expression of that primal creativity of the universe. And if only we could inspire that in young people, in our children, right? In helping to activate that sensibility in our young people, especially. And so I'm curious, Richard, for you to reflect on the potency of that understanding, right? And how can the universe story help activate that creativity necessary, both to sustain the human spirit and also to respond to the challenges of our time?
beautiful. In the work, excuse me, in the work that I do with seeds, we particularly focus on youth. We had this distinct sense that mainstream education is focusing on certain aspects that are very important for us to be growing up in a society that requires certain qualities and skills. But there is soft tissue qualities and skills that they sometimes miss. And so our educational program is meant to complement the traditional education with inspiration, with the sense of awe and wonder that the universe story in particular offers to young minds. And the experience that we've had is that young people are extraordinarily open and curious about that story. A second grade class that starts with the question, how old are you? And they might answer 7, 8. And at that age, everyone is raising their hand. Everyone wants to be heard. And then you start telling a story about how we emerged from our mothers, how we have a lineage of grandmothers and grandfathers going all the way back to the first human being. How that human being has a lineage that goes all the way back to the beginning of life. And how the beginning of life is fundamentally connected to the age of the earth. And we expand from there to the galaxy, the Milky Way. We speak about this spinning, the bringing together of matter that allows for relational creativity to occur. We go all the way back to the beginning of the universe. And then one of them will raise their hand and say, I am as old as the universe. What it exactly does to that child is almost beyond my grasp to comprehend. I feel at this age, we are so permeable and we are so in need of a story that allows us to flourish into the fullness of who we are. I almost don't want to tell a child that there's limitations to your existence. We have to tell the opposite story. There's an infinite potential, a field around you that is waiting for you to grasp it. Don't lose your ability to grasp it. Stay open to the possibility that a new story might come at any moment and liberate you from whatever held you back before. So the universe story is an amazing, a fantastic story to provide that kind of opening. And then it is a relational back and forth between the educators and the students to unpack what that means for us. The key in that style of education is not to act like you have all the answers, but you are discovering the answers together with your students. So it's been a blessed and beautiful experience to witness the spark in the eyes of young students receiving the universe story for the first time and then running with it in ways that go beyond my wildest imagination.
Mhm.
So I'm extremely grateful for the tool, imagination, the creativity, and the fact that we have so much to share about the universe story, the dedication of the reflective cosmologists and scientists and philosophers and authors and spiritual teachers that contemplate our existence, observe the universe, and then come up with the narrative that when you first see it, I couldn't have invented a better story. I couldn't have created from my imagination a more powerful story of creativity and beauty. Um, we should think about that every evening or night when we take a walk to look up at the stars and really feel that we're not looking at a distant object that is separate from us, but we're looking at our own origin story. This is us. This light is inside of us.
Isn't that such a profound sensibility to look up at the stars and in the words of the Journey of the Universe film, which Brian Swim, your teacher, narrates, the stars are our ancestors, right? Out of the furnaces of exploded stars come the elements of our bodies,
Mm,
right? And in that sense, we see our inscape mirrored in the outer scape of the stars, right? This profound mirroring, right? And I see that as such a powerful wellspring of possibility, right? Especially in a time of great social and ecological breakdown, right? And the mental health struggles that so many of our young people in particular are facing. To give people, and especially young people, as you're doing, a chance to see themselves in that much larger context, I do think it has this profound catalytic impact. And I'd love to hear you reflect a little bit more on that, like the transformative possibilities of the universe story at this critical threshold time that we face as a planetary collective. How do you see the universe story as a guiding compass for our times as a
mm,
collective?
mm. The first feeling that comes up in me is that the presence and development and refinement of the universe story comes at the right time when humanity is facing itself from a certain perspective. There is a degree of synchronicity that feels almost too much to ignore. That I feel that in this time, the universe story has the potential to lift us and elevate us out of the strife that you're observing. the degree of anxiety and mental struggles that I see within youth, in my own personal experience, is definitely rising. So there is some kind of collective experience that things are not moving in the direction that we perhaps ought to move, or we can imagine a world that moves through different lenses and different perspectives based on different stories. This is one thing about humanity that I find so unique, that we need more than food and shelter. We need a good story. We need a good story that can transcend the limitations of whatever the old story is presenting. And I feel like we are reaching a kind of climax of what the old story has offered us. There's a natural end, there's a cliff that we are heading to, and we can feel that. And so that cliff in the foresight of our consciousness arises within us, perhaps with the quality of anxiety. But my sense is we cannot just move forward with anxiety. Anxiety is almost the opposite of moving forward. It is the immobility, the impossibility to breathe and to make a move. And what if we turn that anxiety around into hope and possibilities? Where do we draw this hope and possibility for? In the grandeur of deep time, in the grandeur of galactic convergence, in the grandeur of the light of the stars, in the extraordinary grandeur of the life of the earth, the green, the trees, the fish, the mountains, the rivers. If we begin to breathe in the abundance of all of that life and really let it feed us from within, I think we can turn this sense of anxiety around and move into action. Action that is inspired by the story of the universe. Action that is inspired by how atoms formed a long time ago. And our bodies are still made of the original stuff. Inspired by realizing that the light of the stars also shines inside of us, that the human story is far from over, that we have so many chapters to add to the book of the human being. Let's approach those chapters from a place of joy, from a place of expansion, and even from a place of ease, almost as a countercultural process of resistance, but not resistance by fighting the current narrative. It's a resistance by refusing to be pulled down by it and letting the light of the new story, the universe story, these wonderful teachers that have brought it to me and many others, to let this story really fill the gaps inside of us. And then see with curiosity. We don't even have to know what the next step is, but we can approach it with curiosity and joy and hope and trust and be inspired by what we come up with. We don't even know how powerful we really are. We don't know how wise we could be. This is for us to discover in the next chapter. So my hope is for all of us to write that chapter with full heart and with full spirit, with the spirit of Zen guitar, with the spirit of the journey of the universe, that the journey continues, that we are continuing that story. And I, for my part, really hope that we tell a good story, that we take the pen symbolically into our hands and think of the next conversation we have, one cosmic being to another, next relationship we have when we're sitting with a tree, one cosmic being to another. And when we hear a melody that speaks to us, to think about that this melody arose from beings that arose from the universe and are therefore part of the story of the universe. So the music of the spheres is happening right here in our spaces.
I certainly hear that music in your voice and in your story across the Zoomnosphere as we are converging today. You know, Thomas Berry would talk about this archetype of the cosmic self that is
Mm,
at the heart of many of our world's cultural and religious traditions, sort of this enlarged sense of being that you're gesturing toward, right? Moving beyond even um, the boundaries of our physical bodies into this larger, more expansive presence I think we're all drawn toward, right? And
yeah,
I love how you say that this work is both countercultural and yet hopefully creative, right? It's not emerging from a place of um, antagonism necessarily, but from a place of creating a alluring alternative, right, for how we can move into the future.
yeah. That's beautifully said, and you really captured and highlighted for my own understanding the fact that the response to our current time ought to be of a different kind than the past responses. Antagonism is an interesting word. It's very powerful, and we have so much in our history. What if we grow into our response more like a tree? If we are inspired by the living beings around us that have found ways to exist on Earth for some 500 million years, maybe we need to check in with their movement and their roots and their way of spreading the joy of their existence for others to receive. So I feel like the response that we are looking for, that response that we can anticipate, will come from such a different angle that the old narrative will not even know what to say in response. It will be disarming in some sense.
Mm. Mm. I see you sort of standing on this threshold, right, of the old narratives that have, you know, led to this status quo and helping to kind of midwife or shepherd in this emerging form of consciousness that is in many ways a kind of marriage or it's a meeting of contemporary scientific discoveries into our deep-seated cosmic origins and then also this spiritual wisdom of our deep interbeing, our deep interconnectedness. And that's what I find so potent in what you're inviting us toward, this integral perspective. And I'm curious, you know, Richard, where do you see this convergence happening in your communities, in your circles, in your studies? Like what manifestations would you lift up of this new story cosmology really taking root?
Very good. My first response would be following the call of Théâtre Jardin speaking about how evolution tries everything everywhere, that we need to try everything everywhere. My first instinct is to think about all the various age groups that are particularly in need of a story that helps them to expand their sense of self. Um, I'm thinking about the power of transformative learning, learning that is not only teaching you pieces of knowledge, but it teaches you how to learn and how to continue learning with the tools that you have been given. I would certainly hope that we pay a lot of attention to our youth as they are bringing in the next generation, not to dictate what they are thinking and feeling and what they want to do, but to give them a expansive chance to discover more of themselves. My hope is that for each coming generation that there is almost like the lens of perception is opening, it is expanding, it is widening. And what we perceive through that expanded lens will grow beyond of my wildest dreams. I'm witnessing in my own life the expansion from a certain degree of openness to a different degree of openness, but that certainly isn't the end. So my true hope lies in the continuation of it. So practical tips is we need to read the right books. We need to watch the films that inspire us. We need to talk about it one-on-one. We need to talk about it in groups of people. We need to speak about it at home. The universe story is something that I want to be fluent in the community. So that if I bake bread and someone tells me the universe story, why not become a baker with the power of the universe story behind me? So whatever it is that we do is inspired by that greater narrative, that we are participating and nourishing each other. I spoke about the musician, thinking of themselves perhaps as bringing nourishment through melody. If we tell a story of meaning and purpose, and we can nourish the listener. So in some sense, we need to find the listening ears of our time that are most in need of a new story, of an integral story, of a story that brings together, like you said so beautifully, the scientific, the power of the scientific perspective and observation with the spiritual component of discovering what it means to be a human being, with the expanding of our perspective, with the childlike nature of openness and curiosity, to not put a limit on how big your perspective could become, how expansive it could become. And I feel like then we are participating in the flow of the creative spark of the universe. Sometimes if I get lost and I think about where's the spark, and then I think about the moment the first star emerged in the very early universe. If beings would have been around, hypothetically, and they would have lived in darkness for some 300 million years, and they would talk to each other about the possibility of light to emerge, everyone would say, that is, that is preposterous, that's ridiculous. And then the first star emerges, and then the next, and the next, and suddenly we have a universe of light. If this is true for the cosmos, then it is also true for us, that we might be just in front of the critical corner around which we discover this new form of light in us. And to me, it doesn't come from a place of anxiety. It comes from a place of a deep spiritual knowing that we are part of something immense, that we are part of something beautiful, and that we're part of this story that we are learning and perceiving. And that it is our time to write the next chapter in the book of humans and write it as well as we can.
I love the image you bring of baking with the universe, each of us lending our unique talents to this larger participation in the whole, right? Whether we're a baker or a scholar or a uh, craftsperson, whatever we're doing, we can participate creatively in this larger unfolding. And I really do have to show you, in this spirit of synchronicity, I have this beautiful image a friend gifted me that comes from a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh that we can see and taste the whole universe in a piece of bread.
Beautiful. I didn't I didn't know that
Yeah.
that was a quote. Amazing.
Isn't that amazing? And the image you happen to conjure, just extraordinary.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And that seeing the presence of the whole in the tiniest parts, right? And seeing the tiniest parts as enveloped in the whole, I think provides such a sense of connection and tremendous, limitless possibility as you're pointing us toward, Richard. And so, as we come to a close in our conversation, which could unfold for many, many eons of deep time, I'm sure, what parting words of wisdom would you offer to somebody who is interested in deepening their understanding of the universe story, who is interested in perhaps following this spark of inspiration that a larger connection to the earth and the universe might be evoking in them? What what would you say to them?
That's a great question. It feels like a very living question because I'm also still working on that very same question. I think that the first thought I have is to reflect on one's own history and imagine what integral story is held by the different branches of your being. And then imagine what it would feel like to bring those different branches of your being together into a new form of wholeness. And whatever the pieces are they are unique to every person. Are the alchemical substances that you're bringing together to create your inner gold that comes from melding them, from bringing them together, from having them to be inspired by one another. Once you have that piece within you, I would suggest to look outward, find the story, find the narrative, find the teachers, find the communities. There's so much to be discovered online. There's so much information about the journey of the universe that I discovered through you that I would love for people to discover and be curious about and see how that story connects with that new integral holistic piece that they have just put together in their own alchemical transformation. So use your research skills to discover the books that inspire you, discover the films that inspire you. In my own teaching, it was Brian Swim that really brought the cosmological narrative. And when I was in his class and I asked the students, how did you find your way here? Like, how did we come to a class that's called Epic of the Universe? Like, what was your background? What I discovered is each one had a very different story. They had a very different life from my own, but they followed the breadcrumbs, they followed the clues. They saw a author mentioning another author, and then they checked out that author, and then they followed the trail, and then finally they have this network of information that is available that led them to be in a class called Epic of the Universe. And then I thought we have to stay curious. We have to stay inquisitive. We have to dare to put into the search engine universe story or journey of the universe and see what we find. You might be surprised. And then that will lead to the next link, to the next link. And you spend some time with it, then your understanding as to where in that network of that integral story do you find yourself most inspired? And then to me, that would be the call. That's where I would put my energy into. That's where I would put my heart into. The story is the integral story is expansive enough for many to find nuances and elements that speak to them, and um, and then just follow the trail. Like we are very good in discovering and searching if we just know that this is what we're looking for.
Beautifully said, Richard. And here's to continuing to follow the breadcrumbs
Yes.
in your own journey and our collective journeys. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat today, Richard. And I'm wishing you all the best and abundant flourishing with all of your great work that is still to unfold.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for your astute presence, the mindfulness that you bring to your work. I feel my heartbeat slowing down in your presence and finding my words more easily. So that is a testament to you.
Wow. It's a mutual gift, Richard. So thank you so much for speaking today, and I look forward to staying connected and uplifting your great work however we can.